Hepinizin varlığı, buradaki oluşu bizler için çok önemli. Burada hep bir olmak ve bir niyet üzerine beraberiz. Ben birazdan İngilizceye döneceğim. John'a merhaba demek için. Çevirmenlerimiz sizinle beraber olacaklar. Tekrar hoş geldiniz hepiniz. So, dear John, we are so happy to see you. You're so generous. So we talked just soon after the earthquake, and we waited for some time because it was so hot. But it's been 53 days now since we had the earthquake. The earthquake had happened. So we are still in the midst of some emotions, some physical effects of it. So today you'll be talking about working with the actuality of the things. This is an actual thing, yeah, we all know. And how the cultivation of moments of mindfulness and heartfulness. And also how can be disaster and loss can be helpful and healing. So I know that I'm sure here everyone knows you. This is the third time that we have been together. We've been together. The first one was Mindfulness Teachers Festival, European Mindfulness Associations Festival, and the second one was your book was translated into Turkish. Now this is the first time, but if it is okay for you, I want to shortly introduce you to the audience. So, dear participants, dear friends, dear guests, John Kabat-Zinn is a professor of medicine emeritus. And he was working in the Massachusetts Medical School, where he founded his world's renowned mindfulness-based stress reduction clinic. Most of the participants here knows MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction program. He's the founder of this program. So, and the Center for Mindfulness in Medicine, Healthcare, and Society. So we all know his works, but he is the author of 15 books. So currently in print over 45 languages. His 4 books have been translated into Turkish also. So he is also the author of a series of research papers on MBSR. So his work and that of a global community of colleagues has contributed to a growing movement of mindfulness into mainstream institutions such as medicine, psychology, health, science, schools, higher education, business, social justice, criminal justice, prisons, the law, technology, the military, government, and professional sports. So over 700 hospitals and medical centers around the world. So he has books, he has an app, and other guided meditation programs. So with all these works, John Kabat-Zinn is the most respected and influential person in the mindfulness community for me and for, I think, all of the mindfulness community. Now, I would like to leave the floor to John and looking forward to listening to him. Thank you, John. Thank you.
Hello, everybody, and good evening, your time. And Zuma, thank you so much for this invitation that, of course, there was no way I was going to say no, given the enormity of what Turkey as a country and as a, society has experienced in the earthquakes, and then the aftermath of the earthquakes and the displacement, and I won't enumerate all of the horrors of it, but it really is a form of the full catastrophe of the human condition. Volcanoes happen, earthquakes happen, tsunamis happen, hurricanes happen, tidal waves happen, and when they do, there's a certain way in which we human beings are reminded of how small we are and how little control we have over certain forces. And I'm just so touched to at the moment see, almost 1,000 people he gathered here. Uh, and I would like to invite those of you who are on uh, Zoom at the moment to just, there are 39 pages, so we won't go through all 39, but just to look at the people on your screen or maybe one or two other screens and just drink in how every single one of us is, for the most part, at home. And we're at home in a lot of different ways. We're at home in our houses or apartments or whatever, if we still have a home. And a lot of people, of course, by thousands and thousands of people have been displaced and so don't have a home. And when you don't have a home, it's very important to find a way to make a home for yourself. And the most convenient place to make a home for yourself is in your own heart, is in your own body, is in the present moment, because as long as you're alive, that can never be taken away from you. Everything else could be taken away. And so the power of mindfulness, in some sense, resides in learning how to tap into these profound interior resources that we have by virtue of being human and make use of them in the face of the enormity of, in this case, what's happened to your country and to your people and to your society in the aftermath of this series of earthquakes and everything that's followed on them, including all the homeless people and refugees and all the injured and the hospitals and the displaced people. And and to just kind of remember that in these deep moments of sadness and grief and loss, that's part of our humanity, even though it's not much comfort. And there are so many other places in the world, including just north of you, where warfare is destroying, a country for basically no reason. And so there are so many different ways in which the human condition really needs to be met on Earth, because we know enough now. We've been mindful over the past 30 or 40 years of uh, the climate, from being able to take satellite photographs of the glaciers, for instance, and the polar ice caps, to know that we have a major disease of planet Earth too. It's bigger than volcanoes or bigger than earthquakes. And that has to do with, of course, global warming. So the fact that at this point, more than 1,000 people have come on to a program that is about mindfulness as both a meditation practice and, even much more importantly, a way of being in wise relationship with the actuality of things, which means at times the full catastrophe of the human condition that you're experiencing now in Turkey and in Syria in just unimaginable ways. And there's no papering it over or just making it all better or go away. Or, when people are grieving family members, when children have been injured or killed, the losses are inconceivable and irreparable in a certain way, and yet humanity has to go on. And it has always gone on, and these things have happened in the past, and they will continue to happen in the future. And so the challenge of the moment, in a certain way, is how are we going to use the actuality of this moment to refine our capacity as human beings, not just ourselves as good little meditators, but together, collectively, as a human community, whether it's a human community in Turkey or whether it's a global human community, to actually find ways to, one, heal ourselves from all the trauma of all of this, and at the same time collectively heal our country and the world so that we minimize to whatever degree possible the kind of damage that will happen in the next earthquakes, which, as I understand it, in part has to do with not being so rigorous about building codes and the corruption that could, get into society, so that the building codes for earthquake resistance were ignored. And in a certain sense, that makes the government and people complicit with the enormity of the death and destruction and loss and grief and sadness. And this is true everywhere that there are human beings, because we do have to govern ourselves and we have to govern each other and our conduct. And so it's incredibly moving for me to see so many of you come to something that features the cultivation of mindfulness, which, as you know, also means heartfulness, in such a way that we can be big enough and spacious enough in our own hearts to hold the enormity of the losses, the grief, the sadness, the pain, the anger, and the isolation in our feelings, and find ways to connect with each other, to connect with what's most meaningful in ourselves, and to move forward in ways that are profoundly healing, and that to some degree take care of and take responsibility for not only healing the grief and the loss and the trauma from this one event, but healing in some sense the way humanity needs to be in wise relationship to the planet, because we're walking a very, very scary tightrope at this particular moment in time, where there's so many different human generated earthquakes or catastrophes that could in fact impact the world forever. And so let's take a few moments now, and I'm going to assume that most of you have a meditation practice, that you've been training with Zumra and her community and other people, so that when I talk about meditation, it's not like, well, what is he talking about? And isn't that weird? Why are we talking about meditation in the aftermath of a colossal event like earthquakes? And it's that, well, you already know the answer to that, or you would have found something better to do with these next 2 hours than sit in front of your screen, which I'm sure you, as I do too much of anyway. So it's wonderful to be here together. And we really are a kind of not just virtual community, but a community of intentionality and of heart. So since we're all at home, let's be at home in our own skin. Let's be at home in this moment, even with all of its challenges, its pain, its grief, its trauma. And most of you, I'm assuming, know how to actually be in wise relationship with all of the unwanted, which we can't suppress or just push out of the way and pretend, oh, meditation's all about just being calm. No. In fact, we're not trying to make ourselves into anything when we take our seats. We're actually putting out the welcome mat for whatever arrives. And then finding a way to be not calm, but spacious and equanimous and welcoming with whatever it is that arrives. Remember Rumi's lines, this being human is a guest house, every moment a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor, and Rumi says, welcome and entertain them all, even if there are a host of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still treat each guest honorably. So when we take our seats, that's exactly what we're doing. We're putting out the welcome. We're not trying to get relaxed or wise or compassionate. We're actually coming in touch with how wise and compassionate we are right in this moment when we stop trying to be anything at all. And that means your intrinsic nature can come through. So it's coming through in a lot of different forms. You can engage in the meditation practice. Eyes open is fine, eyes closed is fine. And so breathing is one miraculous element of this. So can we feel that actually right now, right here, our body is still doing breathing? And that's kind of like, it doesn't get any more fundamental than that. No breathing, no life. And yet we so easily take it for granted. And with mindfulness, the invitation isn't to uh, think too much about breathing, but to actually bring awareness to the miracle of breathing. That this body is actually giving you life with every in-breath. And that life needs renewal. So the out-breath is as important as the in-breath, because the out-breath dispels all of the work of keeping us alive and then invites the next breath in to sustain that living. And it doesn't, as we know, go on forever. So those of us who are breathing and can breathe easily recognize that it's an incredible gift. And like everything else in this world, it's impermanent. And the same with the whole body. So can we be aware of the breath within the larger framework or field of the body as a whole, sitting here breathing? And the miracle of that that your body was born out of the body of a woman and needed a lot of care and attention for many, many years to find its way to give rise to the you that's sitting here right in this moment. And that we pass on this life to the next generation, and then sooner or later we exit. And so the preciousness of this moment can't be overemphasized or exaggerated. And of course, with all of the people who died in the earthquake, the very fact that you have survived and perhaps lost people, the poignancy of this is enormous. And so there's no one right way to be in relationship with it, but to simply hold it in your heart in whatever way intuitively makes sense to you, and that is based on certain kind of kindness towards yourself and forgiveness towards yourself for being alive and a survivor when other people are gone or severely injured or homeless. And there's a way of holding both yourself and the enormity of what has transpired with compassion, so that we're not trying to perfect any kind of understanding, but in some sense just resting in the awareness of not knowing what all this means, but feeling the poignancy of it all and the miracle of our awareness of our hearts being able to hold it all in a way that is potentially healing, profoundly healing, and liberative without forgetting the losses and the pain and the suffering. Exactly the opposite, by remembering the losses and the pain and the suffering and recognizing that the awareness of your heart, the awareness of the embrace of this moment in its fullness, that awareness is wisdom. It is compassion. And it's actually bigger than the suffering and the losses, and it can hold them in a way that really honors the magnitude of the losses. And we can't do that with words, so it has to be really the wisdom of the heart that holds it wordlessly, and sometimes evokes deep feelings of grief and sadness and tears. And the awareness, the beauty of awareness is that it can hold it all. And that you can, in some sense, find stability within all the instability. And not cling to any one mind state or body state, but to be the knowing and the not knowing, that this awareness that we call mindfulness, because they are absolutely synonymous and they are so mysterious. No one understands awareness. But it's already yours. It's already ours. It's not something you have to get. It's something we have to learn how to inhabit more, because it really is a superpower. And at times like these, this is a place to take up true resonance. And although I've done a lot of talking, I want to invite you for a few moments to drop underneath all my words in this moment and just rest in the silence and the boundless spaciousness of your own heart. And as best you can, staying in the silence, staying underneath my words, staying where they're pointing in your own heart. And recognizing, with whatever poignancy is merited, that in this moment you are fortunate enough to be alive and breathing and whole, WHOLE in English. And also, if you open your eyes, you will again recognize that just by virtue of us gathering together like this, you're also part of a much larger circle of wholeness. It's really impossible to understand, even if Zumra is responsible ultimately for all of us being together today. Who is Zumra? You know, it's like we're all part of some gigantic mystery unfolding. And how did you come to it? And it's hard to say. And of course, you might have a story about it. So to continue to rest for a few more moments in the full awareness of the body sitting here breathing and in silence, because my words have only been meant to be kind of pointers and reminders of what you already know and who you already are. and how important you are in the healing that needs to happen in the aftermath of this disaster in ways that only you will know and can discover, and that contribute to the healing of not just Turkey, not just your society, but in some very real way, the world, because we're so profoundly interconnected. So this awareness is actually available to you, as you well know, 24/7, as we say in English, in every waking moment. And although, as you no doubt have seen during this extended guided meditation, the mind has a life of its own, and it will go here and it will go there, and you'll lose touch with awareness, and you'll get lost in thought and carried away, not just in thought, but in emotions and in the turbulence of the traumatic, events that have unfolded. And please know that that's okay. And the meditation practice is not about fixing anything or making anything go away or making anything better, because that's simply a part of human experience. And and so it's very radical to recognize that awareness is not about changing anything or making yourself better, because you're already perfect as you are, perfectly who you are. And there's no improving on that perfection, which includes all your quote unquote imperfections and how critical we can be of ourselves and each other. And that's wisdom. And that is, in some sense, the embodiment of exactly what we need to go forward and face the consequences of what has happened in ways that contribute to healing and to the sort of social transformations and whatever needs to happen to learn from what's happened and adjust how we are and how we govern ourselves, or how we, conduct our business, so that to the degree that it's possible, we minimize that potential for harm happening again in at least the same way or at the same magnitude again. And so once again, if you care to just now, there's 40 people on the screens, and then we know there's a lot of you out there in YouTube land, and welcome to you. And it's we know we're all part of the same room. Okay, the room is as big as not the world, not the planet Earth. The world is as big as this. The world is as big as the human heart, and awareness as big as the entire universe, because you will never find the edge of your awareness or the center of it. And so we are somehow deeply, deeply, deeply interconnected in ways that are impossible for the thinking mind to fully understand, but that we can feel that. And so just taking a moment or two to look at a few more screens and maybe just wave at people you don't know. Uh, I don't know any of you, but I feel like I have all of you in my heart at this moment. Uh, and to marvel at the fact that every single one of you decided to do this at a time of night that I'm sure you got kids going to sleep and all sorts of homework or business or whatever that, that you need to do. And instead you're here. There's something insanely beautiful about this. It's insanely beautiful and politically powerful, even socially transformative. And so in a certain way, I see you and the work that you're doing, however you came to mindfulness, as being a kind of seed that's being watered and nourished, the way Thich Nhat Hanh used to talk about it so beautifully, watering the seeds of mindfulness. But what's growing is a kind of universal awareness that does have the potential to heal and transform humanity in ways that will minimize harm of all kinds, from natural disasters and from wars and oppression and injustice and racism and othering and all of those things. Minimize that because it's so stupid, it's so dualistic, it's so unrecognizing of people's humanity, and at the same time maximizing well-being, maximizing beauty, maximizing love, maximizing creativity and imagination and caring and taking care of the children who are going to be us, since we used to all be children. Okay. And it's really good to keep some elements of your childlike mind, your openness, your not knowing things, the beauty of wonder and awe, the awe of life and the awe of the natural world, and also the grief associated with knowing that we're destroying the natural world in a certain way. So we have to wake up to that. And that's what mindfulness is all about, is embodied wakefulness, pure and simple. And you do not have to go to a cave in the Himalayas and meditate facing a wall for 9 years with water dripping on your head before you become awake or enlightened, quote unquote. And maybe we shouldn't worry about becoming something else, but actually realizing the full dimensionality of what and who every single one of us already is. And the world would be infinitely, infinitely benefited by that engagement. And I believe that's what we're doing here. And in a way, all of these little thumbnails on our screen, we're all like the cells of the one body politic of the entire world. We're each our one little cell, and the world needs all its cells, every single one of them, and especially you. And I just love that. So the last thing I'll say before we open it up to dialogue is that I see this as a love affair, even in the times of catastrophe and grief and loss and pain and death, and and our history is full of that, but it's also full of insane beauty. And it really, when we take our seats or when we bring mindfulness into every aspect of everyday life, because that's when all is said and done, the real practice, and not sitting in a cross-legged position on the floor. I mean, that's very, very important, but it's not the whole story, and it doesn't have to be on the floor or sitting for that matter. But when all is said and done, life is the only meditation practice that's really important. And so every moment becomes the curriculum. Every moment is the curriculum. And you don't have any backup. You could say, well, what would John say? Or what would Zuma say? But when the moment it arises, you have to meet it yourself, not with any backup. Yes, we learn from each other, but you're as much a representative of the beauty of the universe and the wisdom of the universe and the kindness of the universe, you, every single one of you, as anybody else. And when we understand that, then we may just actually take care of this planet in the way we had better take care of this planet for our children and our children's grandchildren. So I'll stop here. And the only other thing I'll say is that I'm sitting in my own room, in my own home, and I'm seeing all the faces on my screen, and I feel like I'm with you. And I mean, like it's like hard for me to take in, but I feel like I'm 100% with you, and I'm actually guessing that you are 100% with me and with all of us, whoever's on your screen. And it's like, holy cow! I mean, this is quite amazing. And so let's recognize that even in this time of pandemic, which, and travel, not knowing whether the pandemic's over or not, and and the kind of course, the consequences of the earthquake, that we can come together and in this kind of a way, and not just practice together, but let the practice be a celebration of our beauty and of this love affair, and an inspiration for taking it forward moment by moment by moment by moment and day by day by day. As far as I'm concerned, certainly speaking for myself, for the rest of my life. I also want to say, and I'll stop after this, that, there are human beings behind the interpretation, since many of you are getting this in Turkish rather than in English. And I just want to honor the interpreters. Alper at the moment, but there are three. And just maybe you'll meet them later, but a deep, deep bow to the interpreters who do some magic where you're hearing one language and you're simultaneously translating it into another language. And my language is quite complex because it has to do with stuff that's really hard to talk about. And so thank you to the interpreters, and of course to you, Zumra, for organizing this gathering, which is really, to my mind, very, very touching. So let's dive into the most important, I would say, aspects of this. We have almost another 90 minutes, which is, let's talk together and let's listen together. Now, with 1,000 people and then more on YouTube, and the YouTube people, you can't raise your hand and dialogue with us, but you can listen in, and we feel you. I want you to know that. But let's actually recognize that the dialogue, the inquiring together, the listening together is an absolutely essential part of even the formal meditation practice. So it's not like, and I've sometimes said, I joke, hey, has the meditation practice ended? Did I say it was over? Did I ring any little bells to say, okay, now the meditation practice is over? No, I didn't. I didn't ring the bells to start, and I'm not ringing any bells to stop, because there is no stopping. This is it. Every moment of our lives is part of this love affair. And every moment is an opportunity to either be, as we say in English, out to lunch, and therefore like unconscious or mindless or on autopilot, or really present with the full dimensionality of your being. And that means also the suffering, the carrying of the losses, of the grief, of the anger, of the fear, of everything else. And the only capacity we humans have that can do that is the capacity for awareness. It's big enough, as I said, to hold everything in your heart and in your mind and in society and in the world. And we need to learn how to inhabit it more regularly and with greater honoring and trusting of its power. It really is a superpower. Okay, so Zumra, over to you, and I'm open to however, and also we're going to take a break in about 10 or 15 minutes. So after a few questions, we'll give the poor interpreters a break for 10 minutes to just kind of breathe and stuff like that. And you can take a bio break if you like or not. I'm going to just stay here, and then we'll resume after that 10 minutes. Okay. And the break, as we say in MBSR, there are no breaks.
No breaks, no breaks. Yeah. So, John, I think there were some hands and they wanted to ask you, or any comments. Do you want to receive them?
Okay, Virna, and you'll unmute yourself.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, John, for being here. Thank you, Zumra, and everyone. Well, after the earthquake, I live in Istanbul. We're all very sorry about what happened during the earthquake, but also people who live in Istanbul and some other parts of Turkey were in constant fear of another earthquake because there are expectations that other earthquakes will happen. So I was thinking, everyone is preparing bags for the earthquake. So we have water in it, we have a lighter in it, we have applications in our phones. So if we're left under the rubble, we'll need some essentials that will keep us alive. And some people lived under the rubble up until 13 days.
Wow.
So
Wow.
one day I found myself thinking about this, and I was thinking, how will I survive under the rubble? Even if I have water, even if I have some food, how to remain sane, to keep alive in terms of, not going mad. Then I realized that I can meditate. Really, really, that's the only way to breathe and to stay alive. And then I thought that it's so essential. And even now that, sometimes I really feel we're under the rubble, the whole country, we're left under the rubble because there's so much destruction, so much loss, so much to build up again. Sometimes it's really suffocating, but in those times I find myself, the only way to stay there with the anger, with the loss, with the grief, with the frustration and everything, the only way is to stay there and breathe. So my question is that how are we going to help people who don't know MBSR and who will not have the chance to go to a 8-week training, people who live in tents, still under the flood? How can we help them? Because people who go through trauma, they can't close their eyes. Some of them are dissociating. Yeah. So how can we help people in a simple way to learn this basic skill, to stay alive, not to go insane? Thank you.
Well, thank you for that beautiful statement and for encapsulating the challenge in that image of like being under the rubble for days and days at a time and not knowing if you'll ever be rescued. What I can say, hold on a second while I shut off these sounds. Okay. Can you hear me? Can you still see me? Yeah. Okay. So what I would say is that first of all, you can teach these skills very, very easily to people. I have friends, Chinese friends, who went to the earthquake regions in China where, huge numbers of people were killed, including schools collapsing on children. And they taught them simple mindfulness of breathing. And it was very, very powerful. So, you can do that in a few minutes and just say, look, I mean, when there's nothing else that you can do, and just feel the breath coming in and out of the body. It's very grounding. And it also takes you outside of time because you don't know how long you'll be here. Well, but time is imaginary. So if you stay in the present moment, there's a certain way in which you're more secure. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know if you'll ever be rescued. You don't even know if you're going to die. So it's a very existential circumstance. But your question really demonstrates that you already know how powerful that would be in terms of, I'm not talking healing now, I'm talking about surviving. So it's a very powerful survival strategy, and you don't have to pack it in your emergency bag because you already have it. So if you go out into the communities of refugees, for instance, or survivors of the earthquake who are living in tents and so forth, first, you're visiting them alone would be like huge because most people think, well, nobody cares. So when someone experiences caring, selfless generosity, that's a gigantic gift. And then you give them the extra little gift of, breathing. It's not something that that you can take for granted. You can actually, there's a way of helping you to be in the present moment that is healing. that is equilibrating. And that would be an enormous gift. What do you say to that? I'd like to have a kind of conversation with you. So tell me what you think about that.
Thank you. Okay, I can. I think that's very important because it needs to be simple. And it took me years to practice this. And the best way I learned was during the pandemic when we were doing the 13-week of
mitigation retreat. Yeah.
So that was the constant application of every night doing it on, together as a community. So I think maybe it will be more useful to teach it as a community, not just one person.
Oh, totally.
But I work with children, so with children, it would be easier to do it as a group, to make it some kind of a play. Maybe it's breathing.
Totally. And be as imaginative as possible. I mean, I imagined MBSR. MBSR is just a form. The important thing is the imagining. What might be possible if you brought mindfulness into hospitals? Then I could have done 100 different forms. So there's this one form, and it became famous, and everybody sort of sticks to the form. But the beauty of the meditation practice is formless too. You can do it in any number of different ways. And even 2 minutes or 5 minutes with a 5-year-old, teaching them that it's okay to just feel their breath and be at home in their own body, that might influence their life for the rest of their life.
And when you do it alone, sometimes it's anxiety provoking. I remember myself when I started first many years ago, I felt so anxious when I could just stay for 3 minutes. But when it's in a community, it's more regulating, co-regulating.
Totally. And you know what? You could have people do it in a circle holding hands, lying down on their backs.
Yeah.
I mean, you could do all sorts of imaginative things. As long as it's ethical and as long as it's really in the service of helping people rather than exploiting them, use your imagination. Mindfulness is like infinite. So there are an infinite number of ways in which you can bring it to very, very real dimensions of human suffering. And of course, your willingness to do it, that you show up, immediately says you care. There's somebody out there who cares. And when you've experienced loss and grief and trauma and stress, the fact that some human being sees you and cares about you, whether you're a child or whether you're an adult, it makes you cry. Why? Because that's the love, okay? And as long as there's love, then there's hope. And as long as there's love, then there's a sense that I'm worthy, I'm okay. Even if I'm feeling terrible, even if I'm depressed, even if I'm terrified, even if I'm traumatized, I'm fundamentally okay. That's a message we can give to the other person. And they don't have to even think it or believe it. Your presence does all the work. So that's a kind of radically embodied meditation teaching. But you don't have to give people a body scan for 45 minutes, or like 5 minutes, 2 minutes would be fine. And really, ultimately, it's not even the meditation practice that does any of the work. You know what does the work? Your presence, your love. You're the embodiment of the human heart when you show up in that way, with that kind of motivation. So thank you for that question. It's just really beautiful.
For the nice response. Thank you.
Pinar.
Okay. Hi, John. Thank you again for giving this opportunity platform for us. My question is a bit in general. We talk about losing people physically, that we suffer a lot, but when it comes to losing our loved ones, when we lose them emotionally, so how we can ensure the sustainability of mindfulness? It is also very difficult for us, I'm not talking about, the death of our loved ones, but the loved ones who are still alive, but when we lost them emotionally. Thank you.
Would you mind giving me, is it possible for you to feel comfortable giving me a kind of, at least a little bit of a specific example of what you mean by losing somebody emotionally? Do you hear me?
No.
You have to unmute again. Yeah,
Okay. For instance, I'm getting through a very sensible and emotional process right now. For instance, I got divorced like 6 months ago, so I'm a bit suffering still emotionally.
of
I'm
course.
not talking about physically, and I have a newborn baby girl, and it's really difficult for me to get meditation or to follow the mindfulness. And uh, I'm sure there's nothing like this. Okay, forget about him, but sometimes it is getting me with the memories and maybe my anger, this kind of thing.
Yeah, well, that's the beauty of the superpower of mindfulness is it can hold the anger, and of course it can hold your affection and your love for your baby, and it can hold all of the dreams that started to come true and then went in a different direction and didn't come true, and it can hold your anger. So in a certain way, what choice do you have? What other capacity or action could you use or take that has that kind of a range where you're given the freedom to be in relationship to it in accordance with your loving instincts as a mother, and also the poignancy of the breakup of your relationship and the loss and the anger and the resentment and of course everything else that happens between human beings when they love each other and then can't live together. Uh, so that's the curriculum of your practice, and your child will be your teacher in a very
She's
real
indeed.
way. What's that?
She's indeed.
Yeah, and it's true for all children. And if we're parents who have little children or even bigger children in the house, we're incredibly fortunate because we have live-in mindfulness teachers. And the curriculum is not always pleasant because they will push a lot of our buttons sometimes, the older they get. But that's where we can either contract into wanting the world to be exactly the way we want it to be, although we really don't know how we want it to be, or surrendering to the actuality of things and being so big in your heart, in your awareness, that what used to be problems are now just interesting phenomena that come and go. And if you don't feed them, they actually go a lot faster than if you feed them. And I'm not talking about a philosophy, that's the meditation practice for you. With a small child in the house, you're not necessarily going to get a lot of time to meditate formally. But if you rotate that so that your whole life is the meditation practice, then it's a whole different story. And your child really becomes your mindfulness teacher and also your ex-husband or partner. They're all your mindfulness teacher, teaching you about anger, teaching about resentment, teaching about sadness. And this is an important curriculum to learn because if you only have this one life, you might as well put the welcome mat out, as Rumi said, for all of it, because everything is part of the lesson. And even the rough stuff, it's like if you want to make a very fine cutting edge on a knife or a scissors, you have to hold it up to a very rough spinning stone and very, very carefully grind the point, grind the edge. If you put your finger in the spinning stone, it's going to destroy your finger or your hand. But if you use even the stress of a very, very rapidly spinning rough surface, you can actually sort of hone off some of your own rough edges. Does that make any sense to you?
Definitely. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, and best of luck. Okay, who is next? I saw a man there at a certain point next on my screen, and then he disappeared. Okay, so let's see. Ezra? Is it? It's Ezra? Yeah. Do you want to unmute yourself? Hi there.
Merhaba herkese, Zümra Hocama, John Kabat-Zinn'e çok güzel, çok keyifli. Hepsi için teşekkür ediyorum. Biz mindful olabilmek için önce bedene gelmemiz gerekiyor ve bunu nefesle yapıyoruz. Nefesle yaptığımızda beynimizde ya da kalbimizde ya da başka herhangi bir organımızda o an neler oluyor? Bu birinci sorum hocam. Bir diğeri... Şimdi buradan beklediğimiz şey, bir şey beklememekse eğer, bunu yaparken içine sevgiyi depolamamız ya da işte o anki zorluğa yüzümüzü dönmemiz, aslında bu da bir beklentisiz beklenti ya da Zümra Hoca'nın deyimiyle çabasız çaba mı oluyor? Bunları merak etmiştim. Teşekkür ediyorum.
Okay. Well, thank you for the questions. And I'll take the second one first. And you may have to remind me of the first one. But the second question is, whatever your heart tells you to do is what you should be doing. So I can't tell you what you, Ezra, should be doing with the present moment. But that's the practice, is for you to ask. And you can stop for a moment and just sit or lie down on your bed or whatever and just ask yourself, what is called for now? And maybe what's called for now is just breathing and just being, okay? And just watching what's on your mind or what's in your heart. And then maybe that will tell you what's called for now. So again, it involves a certain degree of trust that awareness will, in some sense, reveal what most needs doing, okay? But this is where the psychology of this becomes really important, that we're always into doing stuff. We want to know, what can we do? But what we do needs to, in some sense, be shaped by awareness, by how we be. This may be a little difficult to translate, but I hope not. So when we are learning how to rest in awareness in the meditation practice, that's what I call the domain of being. We're practicing non-doing, not doing anything. But it's not doing anything. It's resting in awareness, which is a very powerful engagement. And then out of that will come insights about what most needs doing. And then do that and see if that is helpful. And then you go back to the silence of your own meditation practice. And over time, what you wind up doing will change, because when your doing comes out of your being, it's an entirely different quality of doing, and usually much more useful to other people. So that was my answer to your second question. Now remind me what your first question was.
Hocam, bedene gelmemiz için nefesle bedene geliyoruz ve o an beynimizde, kalbimizde olan fiziksel neler oluyor? Yani nefesle bunu yapıyoruz. O an ne oluyor bize?
Well, it's a very profound question, and you can't really speak about breathing without including all the organ systems, which would include the brain. And the short answer to your question is nobody knows. I was suggesting, like, even the greatest neuroscientists do not know what sentience is. We're called sentient beings, but We do not know how sentience or awareness comes about, human awareness. Nor do we know how thinking comes about, but thinking is quite a different, constellation of energies than awareness. And awareness is bigger than thinking, so it can hold any thought. In terms of the breath itself, when you go to sleep, your body keeps breathing, right? So that's because you don't have to breathe. Your body is doing the breathing. And that's a combination of what's called the brain stem, this back part of the brain at the back of the skull, the brain stem. And then there's a long nerve that goes from the brain stem all the way, it's in the back, but all the way down, called the phrenic nerve on both sides. And it innervates the diaphragm, which is a muscle that's kind of like an umbrella that separates the heart and the lungs and the chest from the organs in the belly. And when the phrenic nerve tells the diaphragm to contract, it goes like this, and it makes a bigger volume in the lungs. And then the outside air is at a higher pressure than in the lungs. And so it's like a balloon and it fills with air. And then on the out breath, the diaphragm comes up and does like that. But there are much deeper things going on that we only understand to a certain degree. So for instance, when you bring your awareness to, say, your chest or your belly or your legs, how does that even happen in the body? Well, that happens because of the nervous system. And there are maps of the whole body in the brain. One's called the somatosensory cortex, the other's called the sort of motor cortex. And so when you put your mind, say, in your left arm, everybody can try this now. Put your mind in your left arm and your left hand. Just feel the left arm and the left hand. So how does the body do that? Raise your hand if you can feel raise your right hand if you can feel your left arm and your left hand. Yeah, it's a miracle. You don't know how you do it, but you can do it. And when you do it, that's mindfulness. You're mindful of the whole sensory universe of your left arm and your left hand. And if you wanted to switch it to the other hand, you could switch it in no time. So there are maps in the brain, as I was saying, that actually, when we do a body scan, we're actually scanning the map in the brain. So I hope that's helpful, but the short answer is that we don't understand this very much at all yet from a neuroscience and neurophysiological point of view. But it just goes to emphasize how miraculous we are. We're miraculous beings because we can do that. And that's not all that's miraculous. I mean, the fact that I can sit here in the United States and I can move my lips and wag my tongue and move air from my lungs out over my vocal cords and over the tongue and with the mouth, make these sounds that are going into a receiver someplace on my laptop, and they can go to Turkey, and then some transmitter is going to, speaker is going to make waves in your apartment or your house that are going to go to your ears right now as I'm talking and decode this sentence that you're going to decode in Turkish if the interpreter is part of it. I mean, it's like an insane miracle. It's just insane. And I don't know how I'm doing this. That's the beauty of language, really, that nobody understands, and it's like you can, with limited means, create an infinite number of sentences, an infinite number of sentences. And even chatbots can't do this. AI can't do this. So the chatbots are nothing compared to human intelligence. They're very, very dangerous potentially, but they have nothing compared to human intelligence. And so when I say that we're all in some sense miraculous beings, it's true on the biological level, on the cellular level, on the neurological level, and on, every level you can imagine. But the most important thing is the human heart in awareness and our connectivity, so that we're not isolated, but we're all in some sense reflections of the same common humanity, and we need each other desperately. Okay, so here is Rami. He was here before, but
John,
nice.
I think we are, I think we are like 1
Oh,
hour, and then
you need to take the break.
yeah. That's that's why our
I
interpreter.
get carried away. So, Rami, will it be okay with you if we take the break now and then we come back and you be first?
Yeah. First of all, I would like to thank you, all of our interpreters, because they're voluntarily here today to support all of us, and thanks to all of them.
Do you want to come on, interpreters, and show us?
Please,
Can we see your faces?
yeah, if it is possible. I think Alper is from the PC, so he doesn't have any complete.
Okay, right.
But just still, it's good to see them on the scene.
All right. Okay, so we'll take a break and we'll come back in 10 minutes.
We'll take a break, and then there are some questions also. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, of course.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. See you soon.
Let me go into the Turkish. Çok teşekkürler. Hiçbir yere ayrılmayın. Buradayız. İkinci bölümde daha da birkaç sorumuz ve benim de birkaç yorumum olacak. Sizi bekliyoruz 10 dakika sonra. Bir nefes alıp. Ara ama ara değil deriz biz hep. Mindful bir ara olur umarım sizler için. Görüşmek üzere 10 dakika sonra. Yeah, I think we have some time, 1 or 2 minutes.
So, Zumra, just to say, I've been a very bad guest. Please feel free to take whatever time you want, whenever you want, to say whatever it is that you feel would be most
Yeah,
important to say as part of this.
I will. There were some questions in the chat box. They directly asked me and to want me. I think Sherife and one another question. They're nearly the same. So maybe when starting, I will start with those questions. And it's
Okay.
also a very important issue, I think. And then we can include how is it going? We can include the others for the questions, or do you want to go? And you want some, maybe you have some topics that to be mentioned. Are there any things that you want to?
I'm open to whatever you think is best, you know. I'm happy to, talk more about specific topics, but I don't know. I mean, my own instinct is that answering questions like this and having this kind of dialogue is very helpful for people in terms of us all sort of developing a larger framework for how we are understanding the present moment and what practice means, especially in Turkey at this particular moment with what in the aftermath of the earthquakes.
There were dialogues going in the chat box in Turkish. Maybe you are curious about it. It's mostly about the translation. Some people could not do the translation thing, and they were constantly asking about this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's always happening. And,
Yeah.
and the other thing is
Well, do you
there's
want to give those instructions again so that people?
maybe, but I think it's already sold, but there's always some kind of, because Zoom doesn't have Turkish icon. It has, so we choose Spanish. So it makes some
Oh, it doesn't have a Turkish. It doesn't say Turkish,
no, no.
so you have to say Spanish.
Spanish. So sometimes, and also some take some goes to the Zoom with the phones and computers.
Right,
Some
and they're different.
this doesn't support the system.
Yeah, yeah.
And then there were questions. Sometimes, yeah, I know that people want to know about how mindfulness can help us, how it can help us, and wants to find out the solutions. And yeah, can it reduce the anxiety or my obsessive compulsive symptoms? Is there anyone who can? Yeah, there are some questions. Is there anyone who really cope with the anxiety and give up the medication with the help of mindfulness?
Okay. Yeah. Well, you can probably answer all those questions easily.
First.
But the short answer is, of course, yes. I mean, this helps a lot with anxiety and anxiety disorders and stress disorders and trauma if the mindfulness is taught in a way that's sensitive to people who have a history of trauma. So, and there's a huge science of it, just to say. I don't know if I'm being translated or not, but there's a huge.
No, we're chatting now, but I don't know if we have translate or if how is our time. And Begüm, nasılız? Vaktimiz nasıl? Kaçta başlıyorduk? Ben tamamen I lost my orientation to the time and
Hocam başlayabiliriz hemen.
çevirmenlerimiz burada, değil mi? Okay. Now,
Wonderful.
okay.
Yeah. So maybe I should just say, in as general, because the question was asked, well, does mindfulness help with anxiety and stress and stuff like that? And there's a huge scientific and medical literature of lots and lots of studies, and the preponderance of all of the evidence is that it helps enormously with these kinds of things. It's almost hard to believe that something that looks so much like nothing can wind up having so many effects on the body, on the mind, and on our social interactions, our cognitions, our emotions. But actually, that's the superpower of mindfulness, that it can have all of those different effects. but it only happens if you actually practice in a way that's not idealizing some kind of special state, like, that if I meditate correctly, then I'll feel this, because there's no one this that you're supposed to feel. What is being invited is to simply be aware of whatever it is that you are feeling or thinking or sensing or wanting, and then investigate that through the lens of embodied awareness. So that means you have to be your own explorer. Nobody can meditate for you. And you could read all the scientific papers about how wonderful it is. They won't help your anxiety at all. You have to actually practice.
But the thing is, there's always outcome expectation, which is just quite normal, which is
Totally normal. But that's the beauty of meditation. So let me say this very clearly for everybody. In everything that you do, whether it's practicing the violin or becoming a really good chef or whatever it is, the outcome is what you're working towards. You want to have a very, very good outcome. But in meditation, it's the one human activity that's not about an outcome. So it's very unusual, and that's why it's so freeing, that it's not about some special outcome or state that you will get if you're a good meditator. It's about realizing the actuality of your own beauty in this moment, your own wholeness, your own well-being, the miracle of you. So you're not trying to get anywhere else or experience some wonderful state of relaxation or less stress. You're actually experiencing the actuality of awareness, and then the stress is not the same. It's not the problem anymore. The anxiety is no longer a problem. And over time, it will go away by itself. And we have studies that show that. But it's very important to remember that it's not about trying to get to some special state. It's about recognizing that every state you're ever in is a special state. And that recognition comes out of stillness and wakefulness. And that's something you can practice.
it's
And
about
that's called the non-dual awareness. So that we're not making a subject and an object. And this gets into all sorts of philosophical technicalities, but this is the way we teach it. It's not about trying to get somewhere else. It's an opportunity to be where you already are. And if the buildings, because that example was used before, if you're under a collapsed building, but you're still alive and you don't know if you're ever going to come out or you'll be rescued, then what was being pointed to by the person who asked it and by my response is that you stay in the present moment and just be aware. Of course, the mind will catastrophize in all sorts of ways and and there'll be all sorts of emotions. But what might save your life is just learning how to reside in the present moment and have that be okay for now. So it's a very radical approach to life. And that's why it's freeing. That's why it's liberative. So I won't say any more on that. So how do you want to proceed? Do you want?
it's there are some questions on the chat box. Maybe if you
Okay.
like, I can, because I read all of them, and it's just like a summary of them.
Oh,
And
why don't you ask some of those and then we'll go to Rami, who's been very, very, very, very patient.
yeah, okay, if how you wish. So there are some questions about the safety and trust. So it's a very important issue, I think,
Very.
in this process. And we made a survey to the MBSR participants, and we saw that the beginning of that, maybe there is no trust to the body, to the mind, but also something that hasn't changed throughout the MBSR process. And this is asked also by Sharifa, I think, because they don't feel, if you don't feel safe in the country or not supported from the government, if you feel it like that, and then how can mindfulness, they ask, how can mindfulness help us during the times of not feeling safe,
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Physical world.
Beautiful question. Okay. A couple of weeks ago, I met with 30 or 40 MBSR teachers in Ukraine. Okay.
The
Do you
same.
think they feel safe? The United States is going through unbelievable turmoil. In many ways, the United States is coming apart. It's not even clear whether democracy in the United States will survive. So that question of safety is really, really important because all the forms, in some sense, are falling apart. And the question is, okay, so where will safety reside? Well, this is exactly why the practice is so important, is that you can ask yourself, well, where can you be at home? Where can you feel safe? If you have a home, of course, your home is supposed to feel safe. But if it's collapsed, then, or you're worried that it's going to collapse, then that too. So the fundamental home is the body. So to a certain degree, we need to actually, I don't know how to put this, become friends with our own bodies in a new way. Okay? Not to beautify it or to pretend that it's younger than it is or anything like that, or put makeup on, but to actually inwardly, with your eyes closed, the way I did with the hand and the arm, experience the body. Okay, it's very, very powerful. And then the body is being experienced by the mind, by the awareness. So that could be your home, even if you're homeless. That ultimately, as long as you have your own body, it's possible for that to become your home. And everything else can change. And you may not be safe. The world may not be safe. It may be in great turmoil. And it is right now, everywhere in the world. So a good place to start is with the body, okay? And with your own heart. And with your own intrinsic beauty and goodness, as I've been trying to emphasize. And then you exercise the muscle. It's like any other kind of activity, like a physical activity. If you want a muscle to get stronger, you work with a weight. You don't work against the weight, you work with the weight, okay? But a lot of time we don't want to do that because it hurts after a while. But so the breath goes in, the breath goes out, the breath goes in, the breath goes out, the breath comes in, the breath goes out. And after a while, I said, oh, this is boring. Why should I do this? This isn't helping my life at all. And you keep doing it. And then you discover it's not about the breath. It's about awareness. And it's about how much we get caught up in liking and disliking and wanting and pushing away. And then we're prisoners of our likes and dislikes, and we don't actually have any freedom. And so that's a certain kind of insight or liberative wakefulness that you say, okay, well, then maybe I could live my life a little differently. Maybe I could be more in my moments, whether they're good moments or bad moments, pleasant moments or horrifying moments. What choice do I have? I can actually hold them in awareness, and then the awareness will tell me what to do in the next moment in a way that if I'm just on autopilot, I'll just create more and more trouble, more and more pain, more and more loneliness for myself. So that's some of what's underneath the meditation practice and why it's valuable, even though on the outside, looks like nothing. It looks stupid in a certain way. What do we care about breathing? What's so? I mean, we're dealing with an earthquake. What the hell does that have to do with breathing? And I get it. I get it that, when you're in your thinking mind, this could look ridiculous. But when you're in a kind of a curiosity mode for like, how can I be in relationship with all of this horror and all of this unwanted stuff? Well, it turns out that in some sense, owning your experience, however horrifying it is, owning your experience is the first step to healing, the first step to integrating your experience and not being destroyed by it. In terms of trauma, I mean, let's not forget the United States dropped 2 atomic bombs, nuclear weapons on cities. And the amount of trauma that was generated from that is incalculable. And COVID has created enormous amounts of trauma. Okay. And we need to learn how to mourn the losses because there have been colossal losses and many people's lives have been affected by the losses. So we have to bring heartfulness and mindfulness to what's lost and also who's experiencing the losses because life goes on, as we said. So how am I going to be in wise relationship to it? And that's why the mindfulness practice becomes almost like the only thing in the world that will help us to learn and grow and heal in the face of these catastrophic events, and then transform them and transcend them to go on living in a way that is wise and beautiful and compassionate. Now that I've used a lot of words to say that, but I'm trying to actually express something that really goes way beyond words. And that's why reading Rumi or poetry or Hafiz or, Kabir. I mean, in every tradition, there have been these poets who have transcended the particulars, who have transcended the this and the that, and experienced a kind of non-dual wisdom that's not separate from love. And when you tune your own being to that love, then anything is possible, including changing the regulations for building codes and everything else, and holding people that need to be held accountable. And and that's true in every country. So we're having to deal with that now in this country, and it's very, very challenging, very, very scary. But that's why mindfulness is so absolutely important, because if you don't have mindfulness, then what do you have? You have mindlessness. You have greed, hatred, and delusion deciding what's allowed, but deciding the laws, deciding who carries guns, deciding everything else. And then nobody's safe. You see how many school children are being killed in the United States by, machine guns. How is mindfulness going to help that? Well, nothing else is helping it. We need to wake up in a certain way to our own craziness. And it's all based on fear of the others, those other people that we need to have guns to be able to kill them. So, can we take Rami's question? Shall we do that? Or you're muted, Zuma.
Yeah, we can take Rami, and there are some other questions,
In
and
the
after.
chat, so we'll go back and forth.
Yeah, okay.
Okay.
Merhabalar Rahmi Bey. Kusura bakmayın, beklettik sizi. Ya da diğer el kaldıranları da biraz da grup.
Merhaba.
Thank you for your patience too.
Ben teşekkür ederim kendisine. Ben hakikati sormak istiyorum. İçinde yaşadığımız galakside dünya küçücük bir nokta. Biz bu noktanın üzerinde küçücük bir noktayız. Yani bir kaosun içinde yaşıyoruz. Yani karanlık ve soğuk bir yerde yaşıyoruz. Her şey bizim içimizde. Biz her şeyin içindeyiz. Tüm bunlar ne anlama geliyor? Bunu sormak istiyorum. Herkes hakikati arıyor. Ama kimse bulamıyor. Krishnamurti hakikate giden bir yol yok diyor. Ben bu noktada John'un hakikati bulup bulmadığını merak ediyorum. Demin bize söyledi ya, sözlerimin ötesine bakın. Kendisi sözlerinin ötesiyle temasta bulunabildi mi? Temasa geçebiliyor mu? Söylediklerinin ötesini hissedebiliyor mu acaba? Nasıl bir şey? Çok merak ediyorum.
Connected, I'm sorry, connected to the what? Oh, beyond words. Yeah, I get it. Thank you for that. And the short
Ben
answer
teşekkür ederim.
is I sure hope so. Because if it's just words, it's meaningless, it's empty. So you started off with us, the planet Earth being a small speck in this infinite vastness. All we know is that on this small speck, there's something called human consciousness that arose out of, let's say, on planet Earth, 3.5 billion years of evolution, of non-life processes leading to life and then leading to some degree of self-awareness, the mystery of it. So the universe created us and created self-awareness. The universe created the green of the plant kingdom. That's how the earth captures sunlight and turns it into food that we can eat. So the animal kingdom, and that green is a chlorophyll molecule. So this evolved. This is evolution, but it's chemical evolution. Before life, there were these chemicals that came together that create the chlorophyll molecule, which is green. And that has a 4-pyrrole ring structure with a magnesium atom at the center. Now, our blood is red, not green, but that has a very similar structure that evolved in the non-living universe with iron at the center that ultimately gave rise to our capacity to carry oxygen to every cell in the body. So everywhere you look, there's evidence that the universe itself is giving rise to more and more complexity that can look at itself and create, like the James Webb Space Telescope, which is in an orbit out beyond the moon, that can look back in time to close to the beginning of, the Big Bang. 300, I don't know, 1,000 years before the Big Bang, after the Big Bang. So when you ask about awareness and our smallness and the mystery of it, this has to do with, like, everything I've said is thought-based. But then when you drop into awareness, all you have is wonder and awe in a certain way, and a kind of knowing or appreciation of interconnectedness that transcends thought. And you're it. All those hemoglobin molecules are running around in every one of our blood cells. They're doing their job. The oxygen from the hemoglobin, the iron atoms from the hemoglobin, they came out of exploding stars from supernovae billions of years ago that exploded. And then Earth got the iron over billions of years. So that just says to me that we're miracles, and thinking it's one thing, but actually experiencing the miraculous nature of awareness is a whole other engagement. And that's hopefully the answer to your question, is that if it's all thinking, it's meaningless, because the thinking is a kind of limited form of intelligence. But if it's actually resting in something that goes beyond thinking, which is what awareness does, then it taps a whole other dimension of our humanity. Does that answer your question satisfactorily for the moment? Good, I like that answer. Yeah, so you have to find your own answer anyway to that, because at a certain point it goes beyond words. But it's certainly not about thinking or glorified kind of constructs of the mind, including the ones I talked about evolution of the entire universe, or all of that stuff. But it's all evidence that can contribute to wakefulness.
Yes, these are really deep questions, and maybe not only one exact answer. And
Of course not.
John, there are also some questions. I think one of our participants also want to ask physically her question, and the other questions are about their mindfulness teachers here, and they're wondering after this trauma, the trauma sensitive mindfulness. Do you want to remind them, or do you want to tell them anything about when teaching body scan, because there are some questions also about how, some people doesn't feel that doesn't feel themselves safe in their body because of some trauma, and not related just to earthquake, but ask that the sexual abuse trauma. So
Yes,
body,
of course.
there are some questions about the body and dissociating from the body. And do you have any recommendations or reminders for the teachers and for the people who have problems with their body when they just focus on their body and not
Well,
feel?
thank you for that question. And yeah, there's a lot of trauma in the world, and a lot of people, especially women, have a certain kind of vulnerability that that unfortunately leads to sometimes, just horrific violations. And so when mindfulness is suggesting that you can bring awareness to your body, if that body has been the subject of traumatic experiences, why would you want to do that? I mean, it's terrifying. That is like really, a horrible thing to even suggest. And so it's very important that mindfulness be introduced in ways that recognize that for various reasons, men as well as women, a lot of people have trauma that they're carrying either in the body or in their emotional life or family or something that makes it very difficult to trust your experience of just, okay, I'll be aware of my body, or I'll even be aware of my arms or hands or feet or anything, or to do a body scan. So for those of you who are teaching mindfulness, excuse me, sometimes teaching the body scan is not necessarily wise, especially at the beginning, especially if you know who's in the room and you know that some people have had a trauma background. You have to approach it very, very, very delicately. And David Treleaven's work, which you can look up on the web, or his book, Trauma Sensitive Mindfulness, can be a very, very useful guide for how to, because mindfulness is still just as important if you have trauma, maybe even more important, but you have to be very, very sensitive to how you actually meet each person and then help them to reclaim their body, because it's a great sadness if you live your entire life feeling like your body has betrayed you, or that you can't be friends with your body, or that it's, there's something wrong with your body, or it's been, so I like to say that no matter how much trauma the body has experienced, what holds the trauma is bigger than the trauma, just like a scar is just small compared to the whole of your body. So if you focus on the whole, what's right with you rather than just what's wrong, what's already okay, what has never been traumatized, and there's always some part of a human being that's never actually been hurt by the trauma. If you can find that, in the same way as like the body is bigger than the scar, then you can maybe begin to reclaim this body, this beautiful body that's yours, and that's fundamentally okay, even though you may not believe that. And that's easy to say. It's not so easy to do. So for those of you who are MBSR teachers, it's very, very important to lead with sensitivity and kindness, and not forcing people to do anything that they don't feel comfortable doing. There are many, many different doors into the room of mindfulness. And even in MBSR, you don't have to start with the body scan. You can start with sitting meditation practice. You could start with standing meditation practice. You could start with gazing out the window meditation practice. It doesn't have to be focusing on the body when that's, in some sense, a kind of carrier of the trauma. But it is healable if you do the work, okay, of healing. And, you know, if you haven't seen the book by Bessel van der Kolk, which is like a runaway bestseller in the United States and probably in Turkey too, called The Body Keeps the Score, that would be a very, very important complement to trauma-sensitive mindfulness and full catastrophe living and everything else that might be a resource for MBSR teachers for being delicate about how you introduce the various practices, not knowing how much trauma is in the room.
And I think there are some people who are raising hands. Let me turn. Kusura bakmayın arkadaşlar, parmak kaldıranlar ve şey yapanlar oluyor. Birazcık da hani hem vakiti, John'un değerli bilgilerini ve vaktimizi güzel kullanmak adına bazen ortak soruları özetliyorum ben sizin adınıza. Hem de sürekli gelen hani soruları. Katılımcılarımızı da alıyoruz. Sefa Bey bizde söz büyüğün, saygıdan söz büyüğün deriz. Sefa Bey'i en kıdemlilerimizden biri olduğu için soru sormak üzere aldık buraya. Evet.
Sağ olun, teşekkür ediyorum. Sesim geliyor mu acaba?
Evet, geliyor, evet.
Evet. Değerli hocamızı saygıyla selamlıyorum. Bu 2 saat benim hayatımın en önemli anlarından birisidir. Ben 86 yaşındayım. 11 yıldır John Kabat-Zinn hocamızın kitaplarıyla yatıp kalkıyorum. Zaten Zümra hocamızdan da bazı eğitimler aldım. MBSR ve diğer. Bugün harika bir gün. Yani ne kadar güzelliğini tarif etsem ulaşamam yani. Hocamıza, her ikinize çok çok teşekkür ediyorum. Ayrıca şunu ben yaşamım ve 40 yıl, 50 yıldır bu konuların içinde olmamdan dolayı yani hocamın demin söylediği yani söyleyemediği ve ama zihninin arkasında olan şeyleri de kısmen de olsa hissettiğimi belirtmek istiyorum. Sayın John hocam, zaten sizin pek çok kitabınız benimle beraber işte bu Beginner kitabı ve daha birçokları yani yıllardır bunlarla yatıp kalkıyorum. Size çok müteşekkirim. Dünyayı değiştirecek kişilerin belki en başındasınız. Çok sağ olun. Türkiye'ye zaman ayırdığınız için Sayın değerli Zümra hocama da çok müteşekkirim. Türkiye için böyle bir fırsatı temin ettiği için vaktinizi almak istemiyorum. Saygılar ve hürmetler ediyorum.
Seifa, thank you so much for that beautiful and very moving statement. And I'm just really honored to meet you and very, very humbled by your commitment to mindfulness. And it's very inspiring, I'm sure, for all of us to hear you speak like that. And it's kind of obvious. I mean, it's a kind of demonstration of the love affair that I was talking about before. So thank you. So I'll try to keep my answers short, okay? And let's just see if we can't get through a bunch of these hands, because ordinarily, if this weren't being translated, I would say, well, let's go for longer. But it's late at night in Istanbul, and I don't want to exhaust the interpreters. So we only have really 10 more minutes, I think, unless you tell me that you can go longer. But let's just see I'll let you decide, Zumra, who to call on and what has to happen. And I'll also, at the end of it, you should like
Evet.
give us the last words.
Evet. Sevgili arkadaşlar, burada herhalde onlar sıraya göre ekip takip ediyor. Aha, alabilirler buraya. Birkaç kişiyi daha alalım hem.
Okay, why don't you call on them? Or do you want me to?
Merhaba, iyi akşamlar. Sizi burada görmek çok güzel, çok heyecanlıyım gerçekten. Ben de bir MBA öğrencisiyim, sevgili Zümra Hocam'ın öğrencisiyim. Gerçekten de MBA eğitmenliği sırasında 10 yaşında yeğenimi kaybettim ve Mindfulness'ın bir acıdan nasıl özgürleştirdiğini birebir deneyimleme fırsatım oldu. Bu güzel ve güçlü kadim bilgiyi bizimle paylaştığınız için çok teşekkür ediyorum. İnanılmaz güçlü bir yerine hayatımda ve sizin sayenizde insanlara da katkı olmaya ve destek olmaya elimden geldiğince inanıyorum. Şunu sormak istiyorum. Farkındalık anlatılırken hep bir de derler ki bir kuşun uçmak için 2 kanada ihtiyacı vardır. Her zaman iyi şeyleri fark etmiyoruz. Kendimizle ilgili haset, kıskançlık, kibir pek çok zorlu duygu var. Asıl buraları çalışıyoruz. Ve burada da aslında şefkate ihtiyacımız var bu zorlu duygularla yaşarken. Sizin şefkate olan yorumunuzu merak ediyorum hocam. Siz nasıl yaklaşıyorsunuz?
Okay, thank you for that question. As they say, 2 wings, 1 bird. So one wing is often spoken of as mindfulness, and the other wing is compassion. So the bird, I don't know if you can see it on my screen, but the bird is like 2 wings, compassion, mindfulness, but it's 1 bird. So really they're the same. Compassion and mindfulness are the same. When we use the word mindfulness in English, in Chinese and all other Asian languages, the word for mind and the word for heart, it's often the same word. So when we use the word in English, mindfulness, we should really understand that as also heartfulness. It's not like compassion separate from mindfulness. They're the same. It's the 1 bird. So open-hearted presence is a good way to speak about mindfulness. It's not just like military attention. It's open-hearted presence. And it's seeing the beauty in the other, which is why I speak about it as a love affair. It's not a love affair like I want, I need you, I want you. No, it's selfless. It's a kind of profound appreciation, as was said earlier, for the whole universe, for life itself, and for life in the unique form of every single person. And so, of course, when someone dies or is, we lose people in the earthquake or whatever, we need to celebrate that life and not be too quick to run away from the grief. The grief is an enormous mindfulness teacher. And so, to be able to even put the welcome mat out for something as, sad and as, unthinkable as the loss of a child. There's no alternative to actually, in some sense, honoring that child by holding her in awareness in that kind of a way with, of course, enormous sadness, enormous regret, enormous anger, and also even more enormous love. And then the healing is really a long process of recognizing that the world is just like this. It's just like this, and there's no words for that. So thank you, Kanan, for the question and that observation.
And Canan, çok teşekkürler. John, there's a
Ben
really
teşekkür ederim hocam.
and some of the also participants want me to ask this question, but maybe I can invite Gizem. You can also ask this question in Turkish so our interpreters can translate it. It's a beautiful question. Do you want Gizem Dumlu? Do you want to come here and ask your question in person? No? Yeah.
Does she understand English?
Okay. Yeah, she wrote in Turkish. Maybe I can ask her question, and if there are another questions, and you can take them. She
Okay.
asked that the paradox between acceptance.
Actually,
Actually,
oh,
evet, tamam. İsterseniz siz sorun kendiniz.
sesi açıp tabii ki çok teşekkür ederim. Şöyle bir sorun var. Ben de mindfulness üzerine eğitim alıyorum ve en çok kafamı karıştıran konu bu olmuştu. Bir yandan anda kendimi olduğum halimle mükemmel bir şekilde kabul ederken bir ikinci adım olarak disiplin gerektiren, o an belki konfor alanım dediğim yerden çıkıp değişime adım attığım noktada mesela vücudumu yorgun hissediyorum ve fakat benim o an koşuya çıkmam uzun vadede benim sağlığım için faydalı. Bunu da biliyorum. Ve bu andan ana değişiklik gösterebilen bir ihtiyaç. Ben o an içerisinde gerçek şefkat nedir bilemiyorum ama şefkatli mindful yaklaşım benim dinlenmeye devam etmem mi yoksa koşuya çıkmam, ter atmam ve işte vücudumu sağlıklı kılmak için efor sarf etmem mi? Bunun kendimi kandırmak versus şefkat olduğunu nasıl ayırt edebilirim anın içerisinde? Çok teşekkür ederim.
Fantastic question. Thank you for that. And you know, it's not just about running, it could be about anything. So it could be about meditating too. And of course, you can turn the running into meditating. In fact, running is a beautiful form of meditating if you're willing to be there for it. So the short answer, because we're running out of time, but I think I'd give this answer anyway, is that trust in your own experience. Do it, see what happens. You'll learn no matter what you do. If you go out running and you're tired, you'll discover maybe that your mind was tired, but your body's not tired. And then your mind doesn't get tired, and you discover that was a thought that you're tired. And a lot of times it's just a thought that we're tired or that we don't have the energy or that we don't want to do this. So there's something about the discipline of running. It's the same as meditation. Then the running becomes the meditation. Or yoga, for instance. So not doing yoga is the same as doing yoga. Not running is the same as running in the sense that you'll learn from not running. You'll feel like, oh, maybe I should have run. Then you'll get back to running. So there's no problem here as long as you're willing to be mindful or aware of whatever is going on in the mind. And then you make your own decisions and you'll learn from all of them. That's where the inner development happens, from learning from your own experience and observing how resistant the mind sometimes is. That's just, everybody's mind is resistant around lots of things. But that's when we move into the resistance and inquire into its nature and look at it, and then sometimes go with it, sometimes go out and run, even if you're resistant to it. As I said, you'll learn either way, and that's a very powerful learning.
Yeah. It reminds me of the Hokusai poem. It doesn't matter what you do, it matters what you feel. It matters that you care, that you notice. Yeah.
Yeah.
It reminds me.
Yeah. So we're very close to the end.
Yeah.
So do you want to take some time? I know there are all these hands, and I feel very frustrated because I would love to hear everybody. But that's what happens with 2 hours, is it's much shorter than we think when we start out. But I'll leave it to you to tie all the ends together, if that's okay with you.
I should ask to the translators, because it's okay for me to hear, and to you also. 2 hours is so tiring. I don't want to make you just feel exhausted about that. But yeah, there are always questions, and maybe we should love the questions themselves. So there will be always questions. So I don't know if there's an urgent question, or maybe, but in the end, I would like you to.
There's an urgent question up there. Yaren seems very urgent. Oh, and then Emel, also urgent.
Then you might have some closing and maybe it's
Well,
close
I'll
enough.
stay. I'll stay as long as the translators stay.
So, Yaren.
Thank you so much for taking my question. And it is really great to have a chance to talk with you. I want to share a personal experience actually. After I read the book Waking the Tiger by Peter Levine, I started those shakings in my meditation practice. And I want to, as far as I see, the knowledge changes the experience itself. And this is just, I want to ask about you, what do you think of this, the knowledge, the relationship between the knowledge and the bodily experience itself? Because before I know about those shakings as a trauma release process, I didn't know, I didn't shake at all when I do meditate. And after knowing them, those shakings were coming. This is my first question. What do you think about the relation between knowledge and the bodily experience? And the second one is, I experience those shakings in my own. And is it safe to do them on my own? Should I see a professional or something? I'm not sure if I traumatize myself again. This is my fear, I guess, but it feels very safe. And in a mindful perspective, it's okay as long as I am aware of what's going on in my body and my mind.
I think you're answering your own question, at least the second question. The other thing is that I'm not all that familiar with Peter Levine's work. I've heard of it, but I'm not familiar enough with it to be able to really talk about its relationship with mindfulness. So again, my short answer would be trust your own experience. And you know, and if fear comes up, or if something strange comes up, see if you can put out the welcome mat for that and hold that in awareness. Okay. And then ask yourself, is my awareness of the fear afraid? And you may find, and this is not a dissociation, it's not an invitation to dissociate. It's actually the exact opposite. You discover that you may have a whole new dimension of being where you can hold the unwanted, the difficult, the weird, the unexplainable, the shaking or whatever it is, and metabolize it in such a way as you recognize your own beauty and your own wholeness. And that's part of the meditation practice. That's a kind of way of, you know, adventuring in awareness. So, and I can see by your face and by the way you ask the question that you're strong enough to handle that. So thank you.
So, dear John, I think our translators are here for 10 minutes, so we can go to the closing up.
Okay.
Before that, I would like to thank you again because you made us together and to feel that connection. So thank you very much. I know that there are a lot of questions. There are a lot of desire and need for know more, but you know, there's no end to it.
No, there's no end to that.
There's no end to that, and we cannot know. And the question is if it is really useful to know everything, or if they will help us, all the books, all the knowledge.
The most important thing is to be the knowing rather than the information. So the knowing is awareness. And that includes also, and I said this earlier, the not knowing, because no matter how much we know, there's much, much more that we don't know and that we will never know. But we can actually trust that trust in knowing what we don't know, to be aware of that. And that's called wisdom. And then we'll be growing for the rest of our lives and also dealing with the full catastrophe of the human condition. You know, it's just unavoidable as long as we're alive. And it's also a love affair. I don't want to leave. I mean, it's like, you know, just
Don't leave.
this again, I think we should take a few moments and just look at a few screens and just,
Yeah.
just like, I think marvel or wonder at how beautiful all your faces are. And to just say, and I want to bow to Zumra for this, because I assume many of you are here because of her teaching over the years or other people's teaching over the years, that, this is really such a powerful, imaginative expression of human possibility in the face of catastrophe. And I find that incredibly uplifting. And I really want to bow to each and every one of you for your beauty and for your intrinsic wisdom and caring to be a kind of focus of love in the world and a focus of embodied wisdom in the world, and help other people who are seriously traumatized because of human events that and natural events that are completely beyond our control. So, the fact that we can do this with the technology and with, again, I want to honor the three interpreters, that, the miracle of being able to take one language and immediately put it out in another language. It's like, it's extraordinary. So thank you, thank you, thank you to the interpreters. And I hope that we haven't exhausted you too much. But we owe you a debt of enormous gratitude, and Zumra as well, and everybody else who I don't know who's been behind organizing this and other trainings, that that we can come together like this and inspire each other to take on the curriculum and the challenges of being human at such a difficult moment in the life of Turkey as a nation, because of the aftermath of the earthquakes and the fear of future earthquakes and everything else. And I'm really sorry that we're not getting to be able to respond to everybody's hand who was raised. But, I'm not that sorry, because I have this deep conviction that when we ask a question, we already know the answer to the question in some deep way, deep in our hearts. I see people shaking their heads as I say it. And so trust in your own answer. You don't need some expert from the United States to give you an answer to your question. Ask yourself where the question comes from, and you'll see any number of wonderful answers that might be possible right there next to it. And that knowing is your own wisdom expressing itself. So I am totally honored, and I want to thank you again, Zumra, for the opportunity to work with your community in this way. And I want to just also say I wish you all well in the ongoing aftermath of this trauma that no one, I guess, escapes from entirely, because it's affecting the entire country. And just bow to you for your efforts to be forces of healing in the world and forces of wisdom and kindness and compassion in the world, which is very often, as you know, driven by the exact opposite kind of forces that have to do with self-centeredness and greed and more from me and all of that kind of thing, that very often winds up, not being so conducive to a totally fulfilling life in society. And that's part of our challenge living in this moment. And we're doing it for our children and our children's children and for future generations. And I feel incredibly honored to be a part of this infinite network of human beings who care about mindfulness and are passing it on to other people in an authentic way, in many authentic ways. So thank you. And again, thank the translators. Thank you, the translators. And Zumra, no words on my part, but you should say goodbye in whatever way you like.
Sizlere çok teşekkürler. Katılanlara, yüzünü iyiye dönmek, umuda dönmek, hala yapılabilecek bir şey olduğunu bilmek çok önemli. Hiçbir şey yapmasak, burada otursak bile, birbirimizle olsak bile, bu bile çok önemli. Yani biz hep olabilecek, yapılacakların aslında peşindeyiz ama gerçekten sadece bir arada olduğumuzu bilmek, hissetmek, desteklenmek, özellikle John tarafından desteklenmek. Yani Amerika'dan birinin bilgileri değil ama birinin desteği çok önemli bizim için. Gittiğimiz yolda inandığımız bir eksperinin bize destek olması çok önemli. Bu bize umut veriyor. Bu bize bence bir iyilik hali verdi. Onun için çok teşekkür ederiz. Çok değerli vaktini bizim için ayırdı. So, John, thank you again. Thanks a lot. We appreciate
Thank you, and bye-bye, everybody. And all best wishes. And keep up the one great work. Bye.
it.